Hey there, it's Susan Pierce Thompson and welcome to the weekly vlog. Oh my goodness, I have so much to talk to you about this week. Super exciting. Science. I want to talk to you about science and science that pertains to this cookbook, the Bright Line Eating Cookbook that you're about to have in your hands sometime soon. Okay, so here's my fear, if I'm honest. The cookbooks are going to arrive and some people are going to be like, hey, there's no sexy enough recipes in here for me, right? People whose brains are still not healed from their food addiction. And then other people are going to be like, are you kidding me? Like, look at all these sexy recipes. None of this is simple enough for me. I would never use this book. It's completely triggering. And as a matter of fact, I need to throw it away now because there's too many pictures of like yummy food in here. That's my fear. So I want to talk, I mean, those are just stories I made up in my head. None of that's actually going to happen. You're going to get the cookbook in your hands and you're going to go, oh my gosh, this is beautiful. This is helpful. This is fabulous. That's what's actually going to happen. But I want to talk in this vlog about a very important reframe. And this is a reframe that is a slice of, you know how I've been talking about the science bundle that you actually get access to if you get the cookbook and then claim your bonuses and stuff. You get access to purchase the science bundle for $97. So the first lecture in that science bundle, the best science talks of Bright Line Eating, the first lecture is the science of food addiction reprised. So a whole new take on the science of food addiction. What I'm about to share in this vlog is a tiny slice, like 1/20th, like 5% of that lecture. But it's really important. And it pertains to the cookbook and why it might be that different brains in different states of healing might perceive this cookbook in those two completely different ways. It also relates to umami, which I don't know if you've heard of. If you have, I can't wait to tell you more all about it. And this phone call that I had this week. So when I started this whole Bright Line Eating brouhaha, it was in the back of my mind, like, I wonder if certain people from my past that I have not been able to find on Facebook or through social media or whatever, people like long lost people from my past, I wonder if they'll reach out to me and be like, hey, it's me. Of course, the people that I was curious about, like, I'd be so curious if my boyfriend Johnny from when I was 17 would ever reach out to me. He's got this like really common Facebook, like there's like hundreds of him in Facebook. I would never, of that name, I would never, most of them without profile pictures. I could never find him. Anyway, I'm just curious, right? Johnny's never contacted me, but I got an email this past week from this girl I went to college with. Her name's Karen, Karin. And for her anonymity, I'll just use her last initial, Karen G. And she's in 12-step food recovery now. She's in one of the 12-step food programs, one I've never been in, but there's like 7 or 8 12-step food programs with significant membership now. Some of them are more rigorous, some of them are more permissive. She's in one of the rigorous ones. So she was in a meeting one day and someone arrived at the meeting and was like, this seems kind of like Bright Line Eating. And she was like, what's Bright Line Eating? And the person started telling her all about it, and Susan Pierce Thompson, and she's like, I went to college with her. So she reaches out to me and we're talking on the phone. It's been 26 years since we've had any contact, and I literally had no idea, like, would we have anything in common anymore? And of course we do. She's been married 17 years. She's got 2 boys that are like roughly my kids' age. And anyway, we had so much in common. So she says this thing to me while we're talking that I'll never forget. She's laughing and she says, yeah, my husband says I don't have a sweet tooth, I have a meat tooth. I don't have a sweet tooth, I have a meat tooth. I don't know if there's anyone out there that can relate. So she's like, yeah, like I don't care about sugar or sweetness, but like give me fatty meats and cheeses and I'm insane. Okay, that's basically the thrust of the idea. I don't have a sweet tooth, I have a meat tooth, a savory tooth. And so this is something Ari Whitten and I have argued about in the past, and my perspective on it has really shifted over the 5 years that I've been involved in this Bright Line Eating enterprise. I used to think that food addiction was exclusively driven by sugar and flour. And in the book, the first book, Bright Line Eating, I really talked about how it's sugar and flour addiction, not fat addiction, for example, and not salt addiction that's driving addiction, food addiction. I have a more nuanced perspective now, and I want to share that with you. So, okay, let's talk science. Taste buds. If you were educated around the time I was, you were educated that there's 4 kinds of taste buds: salty, sweet, bitter, and sour. And then maybe someone updated you as science advanced and said, oh, there's a 5th kind of taste bud, and it's umami flavor. What's umami? Like meaty flavor. Okay? Now, another way to look at food addiction is as a hijacked form of natural food reward orientation that the brain evolved to make sure we didn't starve to death when food was really hard to come by, right? Like, to understand the brain, you need to just keep in mind the environment that it was intended to grapple with, right? An environment where if the person who owned the brain was not acutely attuned to the necessity of procuring enough calories with the right kinds of properties, the person would die, right? Like, that's the environment that our brain evolved to handle. Okay, so starting in 1988, a series of studies was done. You may have heard me talk about food addiction being driven in 2 ways. You may have never heard me say this out loud in exactly this way, but in different times, you've heard me talk about food addiction being driven by a digestive process, like stuff arriving in the stomach. For example, when I talk about you don't want to disrupt the fiber lattice network, and you don't want to overly increase the surface area that the molecules are exposed to the digestive enzymes. I don't know, that sentence became ungrammatical, but you see what I'm saying, right? Like molecules exposed to digestive enzymes, boom, the stuff goes through the digestive lining hard and fast and hits the blood sugar, right? The bloodstream, however, like intensely, right? So that's a digestive process. That's like in the stomach, in the small intestine, wherever, in the digestive system. And then a second pathway from the taste buds to addictive centers in the brain, okay? So the research on this started in 1988 when a scientist discovered that he could inject straight into the stomach. Now, this was done with rodents, as most research like this is. They didn't hurt the rodents, but they would inject straight into the stomach partially digested starch. So we're talking straight glucose, right? The equivalent of flour. And at the same time, expose the taste buds to either a grape flavor or a cherry flavor, and they counterbalanced it. If the starch came with the grape flavor, the brain wired to prefer grape flavor. If the starch came with the cherry flavor, the brain wired to prefer cherry flavor. So it was counterbalanced, and that way they knew that the flavor preference was driven by the simultaneous presence of this glucose straight into the stomach, okay? Then what happened was this flavor preference developed over time to become really strong. Later research showed that it was a flood of dopamine in the nucleus accumbens that was the mediator of this wiring up of this process, okay? So this is very similar to the food addiction stuff we've always talked about. Dopamine in the nucleus accumbens driving the wanting of more, but now it's driving a flavor preference that is associated with, oh my goodness, there's a lot of straight up glucose in my stomach. What would be straight up glucose? The inside of a white potato, any kind of flour, any kind of smoothie, right? That's going to be glucose broken down from any kind of fiber that would block its flood right into the digestive system. Yeah, any kind of bread, any kind of pasta, anything made out of flour, basically. All right, so there's that. Later research showed that it works with protein too, like meat essentially. It also works with fat as well. It also works with high calorie density as well. And of course it works with fructose, sweet stuff, okay? So basically, the presence of certain intense nutrients in the stomach will wire up a preference for whatever that flavor is, okay? Now, as we know from our community here, some people's brains are more sensitive to that wiring up process than others. Okay. Later research showed that this also works with certain tastes on the taste buds. Salty tastes, sweet tastes, and umami tastes. Okay? So what is umami? Everybody knows what salty is. Everybody knows what sweet is. What is umami? Umami is a flavor that you primarily get from meat, but you also get it from tomatoes, like especially cooked tomatoes. You also get it from nuts, especially like walnuts. You also get it from mushrooms. You also get it from soy, especially like soy sauce. What would you call it? Like industrial processed foods versions of umami are monosodium glutamate, MSG, hydrolyzed yeast. I don't know if you've seen hydrolyzed yeast protein on an ingredients list, or soy protein, or like soy protein isolates. Those are extracts of umami, okay? Like umami hit straight to the taste buds. Or you can do it the sort of natural organic way and make a marinara sauce with walnuts and shiitake mushrooms or something. Okay. Or eat a steak. Okay. Cheese, right. Okay. So you can just Google this, like, you know, it's all over Google. Umami's like all the rage lately. Oh yeah, what's umami? So this is basically people who have a preference for savory over sweet, okay? But we all have it to some degree, all right? So here's the thing about food addiction. You can think of it as a heightened example of food reward. The natural biological process by which the brain is protecting us so we don't starve to death, and it knows to prioritize certain kinds of foods. High density calorie foods, sweet foods, starchy foods, salty foods, meaty foods. Okay? Now here's the thing. There are tremendous individual differences in these flavor preferences when it comes to addiction. And I learned this a long time ago as I was talking with my besties. This is like forever ago. I was talking with my bestie, Kathy, who's now in my mastermind group. And Kathy, this was like, oh gosh, I don't know. We were in food recovery together, whatever, let's say 15 years ago, I don't know, long time ago. And we were talking about our favorite binge foods. We hadn't eaten them in years, and we were talking about our favorite binge foods. So maybe it was 10 years ago, whatever. And she was like, oh yeah, I forget what she said, something like Cheetos. I was like, Cheetos? I mean, no offense, but like not something I would ever binge on. But then I was like, cookie dough. And she was like, oh yeah, I would never eat that. And just, you know, I don't know if it's worth having this conversation with anybody. It's probably not. It could be triggering. Just take my word for it. Like, the foods that people binge on are pretty varied, right? Like, one person's binge food is another person's, yeah, I would never even bother. And some of that has to do with the experience of wiring up the brain in certain directions, and some of that has to do with, we don't know what yet because nobody's doing this research in the right way. Oof, I've been thinking in my morning meditation lately about how much I need to focus on having impact on the questions that get asked in obesity research. It's such a thing. It keeps hounding me this week in my morning meditation. Research, research, research. People are not asking the right questions. This is a question that needs to get asked. Why are some people salty people and some people fat people and some people umami people? Why does Karen G have not a sweet tooth but a meat tooth? Why, in my rough experience with thousands upon thousands of people, do approximately 80% of bright liners swing sweet and 20% swing starchy, right? Like, I don't care about sweets, but don't take away my bread, don't take away my pasta, right? I don't know what the difference is. I don't even know if it matters that much. So here are the two main principles I want you to hear. Number one is, most of this is handled by bright lines for sugar and flour, and then weighing and measuring the rest. Because let's be frank, and Karen and I were laughing about this, 2 ounces of cheese just doesn't get you very far, right? If you have a cheese hankering, because of course cheese hits the opiate receptors, right? It's straight up addictive. And it's on the Bright Line Eating Food Plan. There are foods that are addictive for a lot of people. Nut butters, good grief. Nuts that are straight up addictive for a lot of people. Steak, we tell people to be careful about bacon, but sausage, whatever, right? Straight up addictive for a lot of people. But for many people, if you start weighing and measuring them, it becomes okay. Like 2 ounces of cheese is just not enough to get excited about. And it's also, cheese is very convenient. Like those mozzarella string cheese sticks in most manufacturing packages are exactly 1 ounce, which means you can grab them. They last forever. You can take them on trips. It's so easy to grab 2 or 3 if you're a guy, string cheese sticks on a road trip or something, right? So as I was setting up the Bright Line Eating Food Plan, I was like, let's not eliminate cheese categorically, because for most people, once you start weighing and measuring it, it becomes safe, especially if you have eliminated all sugar and all flour, right? Like, so think about it with me. Where is cheese most dangerous? On pizza. Well, we don't eat flour. In Doritos. Well, that's corn flour in those, chips, and we don't eat that, right? Like, where is cheese most dangerous? On bread. We don't eat bread. So when you eliminate sugar and flour categorically, the umami flavor and salt and other types of fat, and we weigh and measure our fat, right? Like, you can only get so much fat on the Bright Line Eating Food Plan unless you're cheating and like soaking every vegetable in olive oil, which we don't do. So when you eliminate sugar and flour categorically and you're careful about your food preparation, the rest of the highly rewarding foods get consumed in moderation. Now, salt is the one exception. On the Bright Line Eating Food Plan, you can salt your food liberally. And this is where the second principle comes in, which is you are always on your own recognizance to watch your addictive brain and how it lights up. If you feel like you have an addictive brain, not everybody in our community even relates to that notion. We've got people who are 3s and 2s and 1s on the susceptibility scale saying, yeah, I just need help losing this weight. I'm actually not addictive at all. I had coffee the other day with my friend Beth, who was a professor with me, not just at one college, but at 2 colleges in the past. It was so funny how our careers shifted us. She's lost her excess weight in Bright Line Eating. She's a 3 on the scale, literally a 3. And she could not lose her excess weight before Bright Line Eating. It's that hard to lose your weight in this society, even if you're lower on the scale, okay? So, principle number 2, you are always on your own recognizance. You are self-responsible to determine whether a food is lighting up for you or not. Sometimes people write in, what does it mean if a food lights up for you? It's like, well, are you thinking about it all day? Like planning how you're going to get it into your next meal? Are you feeling like you're having it all the time? Like, is a meal not a meal unless you've got cheese in it, nuts in it? Yeah, like even if it's just once a day, like in your breakfast or something. What if you removed it from your breakfast for a week? Would you like grieve a secret dying death inside? That's a sign. We're supposed to love our food. It's supposed to be delicious, but it's not supposed to be something that, we love like our kids or our parents or something. So you want to be neutral around your food, meaning if you can't have it one morning, you hardly even notice. Like if it's not the most convenient thing to eat, you would pick something else and not think twice, right? Not grieve. If you're out and it's like really inconvenient, do you drive across town to the particular grocery store where you get it and disrupt your whole day to make sure you have it for your meal the next day when you could eat something else that you already have at home? That's a red flag, right? If any of those things ring true, that's something that's lighting up for you, and you might want to look at giving it up for a bit, because food neutrality is way better than food need, food addiction. It just is. Let it go. Doesn't matter, right? Now, if you have a rebel part that's like, what do you mean it doesn't matter? It does matter. That's a sign that your brain hasn't healed because you're relying on that food too much. Okay. So, umami. Soy sauce is a big deliverer of umami, so watch that, Salt, fat. These things are going to be more potent in combination, okay? So for example, if you're on maintenance and you're having a baked potato at lunch or dinner and you're drowning it in balsamic vinegar, which is a free condiment, notice that, right? That's a combination of straight up glucose starch and fructose and balsamic vinegar, and then shaking it with salt, and then putting your fat as like a full tablespoon of butter right on that potato. You're making a cocktail of highly food rewarding ingredients that's going to be addictive. These things layer together, and the food companies know this when they talk about reaching the bliss point of layering foods in certain ways. So bringing all this back to the cookbook, there are going to be combinations of foods in there that are triggering for some people. And we did factor that in with the little bells in the corner, right? Like 1 bell, 2 bells, 3 bells. How much is this likely to ring your bell? But you are the ultimate arbiter of that, because people are different. Salt is way more rewarding for some people than for other people. Umami is way more rewarding for some people than other people. Some people don't have a sweet tooth, they have a meat tooth. So, you are self-responsible. Use this cookbook to expand your offerings, to expand offerings like at potlucks and parties and stuff like that, to expand your options, to try new things and celebrate looking at the before and after pictures at how amazing our community is. But if anything is triggering to you, let it go. You don't need to be cooking that recipe or any of it, using the book at all, right? And if it's fine for you, just because other people are reporting, oh my gosh, that recipe was so triggering for me, if it's fine for you, own that as well. Say, oh, that's interesting, it wasn't for me, right? And just rewind this video if you need to hear again what it means that something's lighting you up or triggering you. Okay. I think that's it for the weekly vlog, but I do want to say the cookbook already, it doesn't even come out until October 22nd. It's not even published until October 22nd. It already hit number 4 on all books on Amazon. Now, Amazon updates that hourly, so I'm sure it's not number 4 anymore. But it did hit number 4 of all books on Amazon. I had no goals for this cookbook because, as you know, I've been in breakdown mode. Like, I'm coming out of breakdown now, but I did not like set major plans for this in terms of goals. Like, oh my gosh, I want to hit the New York Times bestseller list or whatever, right? But when you, my precious, precious community, just started buying up the cookbook and we hit number 4 on all books on Amazon, I have to admit, I am so ridiculously achievement oriented. That's a trait, by the way, in psychology. I'm so high on that trait, it's ridiculous. And I did start to think, oh wow, our community, we could hit number 1 of all books on Amazon. Why would that matter? Well, credibility. You know, we have spread the Bright Line Eating message through methods that a lot of people look askance at, like, oh, that, you know, whatever, just with a YouTube following and a whatever, right? So the scientific establishment and the medical establishment and whatever, right? Like, you know, they're here in their mind and we're like over here, whatever. But when a book hits number 1 of all books on Amazon, they're like, that's kind of the equivalent of the New York Times bestseller list these days, right? Which is a very skewed. I don't know if you know this, the New York Times bestseller list is like a couple dudes in a room just deciding which books they think are worthy. It's not actually any kind of measure of which books sell the most that week. And they're extremely biased against books like ours. Yeah, they like, you know, historical, whatever. Anyway, I'll stop rambling now, but long story short, I have a plan. I've hatched a plan of how we could hit number 1 out of all books on Amazon. So I'm not going to tell you what it is now. I'm not telling. I'll tell you soon. Watch your email. You'll hear about it unless you're living under a rock or like steadfastly refusing to open all Bright Line Eating emails for the next 3 weeks. Okay. I love you. Don't forget, we're going to be cooking with the Thompsons the night the cookbook is published, October 22nd. Live on Facebook, and the 23rd and the 24th, 3 days in a row. It's going to be adorable. My daughter Alexis wants to be a chef, and oh my gosh, her trying to pick out recipes out of this cookbook, cutest thing ever. You don't want to miss it. That's the weekly vlog. I'll see you next week.